Testing 1, 2, 3. America and the West, uh, as a whole, nearly, are being sabotaged. The people are being deceived, robbed, led into destruction. The nations of the West are being divided more and more, and the people are turning against each other, all while being distracted by useless controversies and unimportant information and fruitless trends and movements. People sometimes dismiss it like it's normal, it's not that big a deal, or they cherry pick issues one thing at a time, whether it's, the one thing that bothers you, like feminism or the environment or the crime rate of a specific demographic. People cherry pick. But we, as the nations of the West, as a civilization, um, have been stalled by a factor no less than several decades, probably more, in terms of progress and development and advancement. Sabotage is the word, beyond a doubt, or it would be if it were indeed choreographed or orchestrated by some external force. And naturally, if we saw that it was, we would retaliate. We would rise up and stop it. No, is that not correct? Would we not? Wouldn't everyone sort of be upset about that? And though there are actors, certainly, at least there are actors in the world who feed this cycle, it is our nations which are no more than the people of these nations, our nations, the people, our people. It is us who have slid into this decadence, or in other words, sin. People have turned to a form of hedonism in that they chase after the pleasures of the world, drugs, sex, or an ego trip. They, you know, they rally behind any ideal or cause that strokes their own ego, their own image of themselves, or their own self-interests, creating and feeding into movements that are ultimately nothing more than placing all of the blame on someone besides themselves, and often people that are the opposite of themselves, or rather a mirror of themselves. Feminists pointing the finger at the men who are much like the feminists but male, in that they're egocentric and selfish and want to put the responsibility of all of their problems on someone else. Democrats do that to Republicans. Republicans often do it to Democrats. Uh, Unreligious people do that to religious people. And sometimes religious people do it to them, the unreligious people too. Blacks do it to whites. Whites throw it back at blacks. Or, whatever. Whatever makes them feel something. Something more pleasing than shame or responsibility or blame on themselves. Any high, any little squirt of endorphin or whatever, and everything, of course, that induces that is uh, prized. But alas, we are sinners. We do what we like. when we can. We're not machines. We're not like ants. Um, you know, all about function and productivity, perfect efficiency. It's understandable that this would happen, but it seems that with the advancements of the Industrial Revolution in particular, the level of, well, the quantity, the gross just mass of comforts that we see today in our modern world, and the tolerance of folly and foolishness and decadence has allowed people to live a way of almost pure indulgence. Not everyone does it, and certainly not everyone even can, but many do, and far more than we did before in previous, uh, say, the last century or a couple centuries ago. This wouldn't have been tolerated due to the Christian um, norms. But we are sinners, and you could say if you're not religiously inclined, you could say we're animals. We do what we do. This is human nature. And you wouldn't be wrong. All the same, the decadence of our societies has cost us the future, or at least the near future, or distant near future, if you'll take my meaning. Sin is why, and that's what you get with sin. It's why sin is bad. That's why it was forbidden. Because it's bad. I don't know what to say. It's if we were animals living in forests and jungles, um, you know, you do what you can to have a good time, to get whatever you need, whether you gotta steal it or kill for it or, uh, you know, civilization, though, is a whole different game. We're in this transitional phase, I think, as a species, where we act like we are animals with um, predispositions towards a more selfish way of life, not having to look out for a lot of others, not having to interact with millions of other people, not having to tiptoe around millions of other people or accommodate each other to the full extent that I think is necessary for a population of millions upon millions, certainly billions. And we're certainly not made for taking into consideration the bottom lines and um, deadlines and budgets and productivity and the foresight of entities comprised of these millions of people, either, or billions, which is that's nation building, that's civilization, and so here we are. If there is some control or outside actor, a central outside force that's manipulating this new flow of trends toward self-destruction, ultimately, I guess we could call it the devil. Funny enough, though, the corrupt masses, or the more corrupt masses out there amongst the rest today, are more in favor of sin and promote sin and Satan more than it seems they ever did before. And many circles eagerly follow into more and more of the wicked things, and more wicked things than there were a few years before. And this, as it catches on and absorbs people into its sphere of influence, is destroying our civilization in the process. All for the sake of kicks. People's own nihilistic and hedonistic good times, I guess. And without the old justice that would have purged these things from our society, it just grows and grows. It multiplies because it is allowed to. And that's where we're headed. And again, people often cherry pick one issue or a couple as it suits them, their own worldview, their own interests, even ultimately their interests. It's not rectifying anything fast enough. But the bottom line is that sin is killing everything that this world could hope for, that the human race could strive for, and may have otherwise received. And if you're familiar with the Bible at all, believe it or not, however you want to interpret it, allegedly, we're not bringing this shit to heaven. And I'm of the personal belief, because if you read the Bible, it's actually pretty clear that heaven is actually space. And I wish I could take our side, but it works out. I really can't blame it. I can't blame God. And if you don't believe at all in religious things or spiritual things, I would still recommend you maybe give the Bible a read and see if it says anything that you can maybe make sense of or relate to. Ultimately, though, the people of the world today, with all of our tendencies toward foolish and disgraceful and often terrible things, we are not fit for high civilization. And in fact, these things are destroying our hope for even a lesser, even earthly civilization, or at least the chances that it will be a good one, efficiently run and managed and operating, well at all, with the millions upon millions upon millions of people that these civilizations are comprised of. If those people are just horrible for that kind of thing, then yeah, it's going to crash. And if you subscribe to Holy Scripture, then it makes perfect sense that we're going to be destroyed, except for the chosen, who are redeemed from the earth before the end. So, on the other hand, I mean, it seems like almost natural that a primitive species would have some major complications becoming a higher civilization, say spacefaring civilization, you know, like the shit in the movies. Well, that stuff's stupid, but something better than that, bigger than that, something real. It's like we act like animals, but we want to play around with egos like we're little gods or something. And things like science are our ticket to being creators ourselves and seizing the stars. And I think the Bible said something about mankind trying to set itself over even the stars of heaven. But I remember the story of the Tower of Babel. The moral of that story is where, I've said it before, I might have even said that on this channel before, but they tried to build their way to heaven, and God saw how wicked they were, and said something like, well, man, they could come, if they come together like this, they could do anything. And then he wrecked their shit and fucked them up and scattered them about the world and confused their language where they couldn't even understand each other well enough to communicate. Threw them back into the Stone Age or whatever, so to speak. And I think that's a message for us today. So I would say that, well, what I'm trying to say with this whole video is that people that, anyone that cares about how wicked this planet, these people of this world have sort of become now that they were able to, I hope somebody can do something. Maybe talk some sense into people. I don't even call it evil. It is something like an insanity. I mean, hell, even then, and like the first thing God said to do is like not to fuck with knowledge of good and evil, right? And the stuff, it's like everything people do is for some kind of reason. If we're gonna be bigger, then we're gonna need to be better. And I think the nations of the world should start working on that. God had left a system for that in the Bible. You know, in his justice, or justice, if you want to call it, a system. It systematically purges, or in one form or another eliminates those sinful, say problematic pieces of the society. The gene pool. Yeah. I think we're in need of a revival, and I think that we need to consider advancements to our how would you put it, logical technologies, like systems and laws, policies, methods, not technical stuff like machines, but logical stuff, soft innovations. And the Bible had it pretty good. But hey, if you don't like that, you think you're too proud, I won't turn you away. If you think you can do better, then get to work, figure it out. But I'm not even playing. The human race, well, the future of what the human race becomes and what human civilization becomes depends on what we do from now on. And how we do things determines how things will turn out. And with sin, you only get destruction and failure, because that is the nature of sin. That's why it is folly. That's why it's bad. But it's not about evil. It's really just about not being good enough. But there's forgiveness. We're forgiven. At least for most things. Because people do what people do. It's like a dog does what a dog does, you know? A person does what a person does. And I'll leave it off here with this one little word of, fair warning. If you want to save your nation, your civilization, your race, whatever it is, if you care about it that much, understand that you cannot control the rest of what you are a part of. You can't make it do what you say, what you want. You can only do your part. And that means you repent, you better yourself, you can encourage people to do the same, but ultimately there are billions of people in this world, most of whom don't want to be told what to do, and really don't want to be told anything they don't already think or feel like doing. It's a pickle, that's for sure. But at my own risk of being outcast, ostracized, but I'm used to it. I'm used to people talking shit. But I wanted to at least say this so that if you cared to listen, you would hear it. You would at least have been told. So yeah, maybe you can take it and run with it. And maybe if enough people do, it'll add up.